Hi, I'm Tanya Martin. I work for Mennonite Mission Network as the Worker Care Coordinator. And we're so glad that you have committed to serving through the SOOP program. And as you prepare for your assignment, we'd like to offer some thoughts on healthy boundaries to help your experience be the best it can be. Sometimes the topic of boundaries, harassment, and child protection can be challenging ones, but they are so important. Mission Network highly values community. We hope our SOOP volunteers work to foster safe and healthy communities as they work and serve alongside our partners. We hope that none of you will either cause or receive harassment or abuse of any kind while serving through SOOP, but if it does happen, we want you to be able to recognize it and know what to do. As we begin this conversation, we realize that it's possible, even likely, that some of you have already experienced harassment or abuse of some form in your lives already. If so, this discussion could be uncomfortable or even painful. If you feel at any time during this video that memories or hurt are too strong, please stop the video and take care of yourself. And when you're ready, we encourage you to find a safe person to talk with about your experiences or unhealed hurt to begin the process toward healing. Our hope for this discussion is not to increase your hurt in any way, but to increase our awareness and understanding and work toward prevention of harassment and abuse. So let's start by talking about boundaries. Boundaries can feel restrictive to us at times, and our natural tendency is to want to cross them, or at least push them a bit. Just how far over that speed limit can I drive and still be within the bounds of acceptable speed, right? But at times, boundaries help us feel safe. And some boundaries are just simply a necessity. Boundaries that are built and maintained well allow us to live together safely. They show us where our responsibility ends and another's begins. In this case, they keep the neighbor's livestock where they're supposed to be, at least most of the time. They allow neighbors to live together peacefully. And I think boundaries in relationships do the same thing. They honor and respect the space of another and create the possibility for a relationship, from the most casual to the most intimate. Like this barbed wire fence, they need to be crossed with care. They occasionally need to be tended and repaired, but in that process, trust grows in relationships. So what are the goals of healthy boundaries in a service setting? Well, I think the goals are to maintain the integrity of your relationships with those you will serve and those you will serve alongside. The goal is to protect those who are vulnerable, like clients, children, elderly people, or people with disabilities, as well as other volunteers. I think it's helpful to think about boundaries in terms of boundary crossings and boundary violations. Boundary crossings are a part of life, ministry, and service. Anytime we touch someone, we cross a boundary, a physical boundary. Anytime we ask someone a personal question, we cross a social or emotional boundary. These crossings are neutral in and of themselves. Boundary crossing is a necessity in relationships. It's how we build relationships, and will likely be a natural part of your service assignment, meeting new people, or offering a word of encouragement. Boundary violations, on the other hand, occur when the boundary crossing is not in the best interest of the other and results in harm. So, commenting on someone's appearance in a way that makes them uncomfortable would be one example. The key to knowing the difference is to consider for what purpose and in whose interest are we crossing this boundary. So who is benefiting from the action, you or the receiver? The same activity could be either a crossing or a violation. For example, a phone call can be used to either build up the other person or to harm them. Jesus provides a valuable paradigm for understanding the difference. Jesus was all about boundary crossings, eating with sinners, talking with women, touching lepers, healing on the Sabbath. But he never crossed boundaries to cause the other person harm or for his own gratification. He never violated boundaries. So let's take a few minutes here to consider these concepts in the context of your SOOP assignment. What are the boundaries you will likely encounter in your SOOP assignment? And what are the possible boundary violations that could occur? Perhaps even unintentionally if you aren't paying attention. Just to help you get started thinking, you'll likely be meeting lots of new people during your SOOP assignment. One example of a boundary crossing might be hugging a person you don't know very well. If the other person initiated the contact, your hug could be an appropriate boundary crossing, one that conveys care and makes the person feel accepted and valued. But if you initiate the hug and it makes the other person feel uncomfortable, then it has become a boundary violation, even if you didn't mean for it to be. So take a few moments now to pause the video and consider what possible boundary crossings you might encounter in your SOOP assignment and the potential boundary violations. When our needs take priority and we forget the importance of acting in the best interest of others, we are at increased risk of boundary violations. Let's take a little time now to consider harassment, what it is, and what we can do about it. We'll start by defining sexual harassment. The law defines sexual harassment as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature that affects an individual's employment, unreasonably interferes with his or her work performance, or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So that could include things like name-calling, comments about a person's body or sexual activity, physical gestures, stereotyping based on a person's gender, offensive jokes spoken or sent electronically. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects people against workplace harassment in the U.S., and state laws address harassment outside of the workplace, like on the street or the bus or other public spaces. The cultural norms may be different than what you are used to in the places that you are going to serve. Recognizing those differences can be helpful as you respond to harassment, but always remember, harassment is not okay, and it's not the receiver's fault. This is Section 1 of Mennonite Mission Network's statement on harassment and discrimination. Mennonite Mission Network strives to provide a work environment where relationships are empowered by respect, where power is not abused, and where no one will be subjected to harassment and/or bullying. Our staff, workers, and participants go through regular harassment and discrimination prevention training. Mennonite Mission Network will not tolerate workplace harassment or bullying of any kind, or the use of racial, sexual, gender-biased, age-related, ethnic, or disability-related innuendos, slurs, or jokes. So harassment can come in many forms. It can be based on race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, age, disability, physical appearance, or socioeconomic level, to name a few. Mennonite Mission Network asks all staff, workers, and program participants to be aware of situations where intervention is warranted, especially when others condone, overlook, or actively ignore the offending situation. If you experience harassment, intimidation, bullying, or abuse, or if you observe another person being harassed, bullied, or abused, it is very important to report this conduct. To report harassment or abuse, please contact your local SOOP coordinator or a SOOP staff person. So what can we do if we observe or experience harassment of some kind? Here are 5 possible responses to situations of harassment or abuse, things you can do in the moment. So the first thing that you could do is to distract or interrupt the situation. Ignore the harasser and calmly engage the person who is being targeted. For example, you could strike up a conversation with the person being harassed. Ask them for the time or for directions. The second thing you could do is to delegate or ask others to help out. So if you're in a school, you could ask a teacher or a counselor. On the street, maybe talk with another bystander and decide what should be done. In a business, ask the business owner to intervene. Or if you're on a bus, let the bus driver know that harassment is happening. Remember, before calling the police, always ask the targeted person for their permission. A third thing that you can do is to delay. If you can't act right away, check with the targeted person at a later time. For example, you could say, "Are you okay? I saw what happened and it wasn't okay. What do you need?" Just acknowledging the harassment and checking in with them can help reduce the feelings of isolation, fear, and can even lessen their trauma. Studies show that this may be the most effective intervention for the victim. The fourth thing that you can do is to document. You could film the abuse or write down what you observed. You always want to ask the targeted person before you would share any footage that you might have taken. The fifth response is a direct response. This is by far the most risky option. First, you would want to assess the situation and decide if this approach is safe for you and for the receiver of harassment. Consider the risks and read the nonverbals in the situation. If you think it's safe to intervene, confront the situation. Be firm and clear and concise. For example, "That's not appropriate. Leave them alone." Or, "I see what you are doing. It's harassment and it's not okay." Thanks so much for listening and thinking about harassment prevention with us today. Please join us for our next video on child safety.